Welcome to Empathy Led, a show about empathetic leaders, organizations, and brands. And for people like you who want to infuse a great dose of empathy into the personal and professional life. This show is brought to you by the Grio agency. I'm your host, Junior Nyam, Grio Chief Empathy Officer. In this episode, I have the immense pleasure to have a conversation with Marisa Ciesluk. She's a leadership coach, but as we love to call her, she's a chief fire starter. We will let her tell us exactly what that means. Marisa, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for agreeing to be our newest guest on Empathy Led.
Thank you. I'm excited. I'm excited about our conversation.
I've been very looking forward to this conversation. I think the work that you do is so perfect for what we do at Grio and what we're trying to do for companies and for organizations. So before we dive into all of that, for the people who don't know you, tell us a little about yourself. What's your story?
Yeah, so I'm Marisa Ciesluk, and I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. And two things that stick out for me from my childhood. One is that I grew up with all four of my grandparents, and all four of my grandparents lived within a 5-mile radius of our family. That is not a norm. And every Sunday, we would go to my grandmother's house. We were a small yet mighty family, but we would go to my grandmother's house and gather around my grandparents' table and have lunch. So every Sunday, we would break bread together. That is one of the most meaningful and profound moments of growing up in my childhood. The other thing is that I pretty much came out of the womb knowing that I wanted to be an educator. And so growing up, I was the little girl that would come home from school and set up all of her dolls and all of her stuffed animals, and I would teach them. And I had office referrals, I had a principal's office, I had the whole shebang. I had dry erase board, chalkboard, everything. So I knew from day one that I wanted to be an educator of some form or fashion. Fast forward, I went off to college, thought I was going to be this elementary education teacher, did 4 years studying elementary education, did my student teaching in 1st grade and 7th grade, and was like, absolutely not. This is not what I want to do. And so I literally left my college graduation. And the other little note there is that I'm a 1st-generation college student. But I left my college graduation and went back to my residence hall and started filling out applications for graduate school. Went on to get my master's in higher education administration and spent 20 years in the field of higher ed. And it was something that was a meaningful and powerful experience for me. I grew a lot. I learned a lot. And 5.5 years ago, my husband and I had our daughter. And as kids do, right? They change your world. Had no idea how much she was going to change my world, but she totally shifted the way that I see myself. I see her. I see the world. I just see other people. And simultaneously, we had found out that we were pregnant, and simultaneously, I had been offered the opportunity that I thought was kind of the crux of my professional journey. And I came back from maternity leave a changed woman, to be honest. And when I came back, this voice that had been inside of my head for probably about 10 years, if I'm being fully honest, was screaming at me that I was called for something more, and called to do something more with my life, and really called to do something more for women specifically. Because now I had this little human, this little girl that was looking at me that I was modeling for. And so, so 3 years ago, I decided that it was time to be more loyal to my dreams than my fears. And said it's time for me to go and do what I'm called to do, and that's to be a leadership coach and work with leaders to help them be better, be braver, be bolder in leading their teams and leading their organizations, And I've continued to learn and grow and change. Just the amount of growth that has occurred in me in the last 3 years. Like some days I look at myself and I'm like, I don't recognize the woman that I was 3 years ago. I really honestly don't. I have more joy, more fulfillment, more meaning and purpose. And so, yeah, I'm living the life that I know. Yeah. I am designed and called to do and be. So yeah, so we're in my home today, and I live here with my little human and my husband Matt and our fur baby Sully.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I don't even know where to start. Yeah. I think I want to start with at the very beginning. What was it about those family gatherings that made those moments special enough for it to like stick out of a plethora of childhood memory?
I think a big part of it is that we came around together around food. That's a big part of my childhood and just memories. Like my parents were constantly having people in our home and inviting strangers, new friends. There was constantly people in our home. And I think a lot of that started around that table is that, yes, we were family, but we all came together. And even though we were maybe different throughout the rest of the week, that didn't matter when we came to Grandma's house. Yeah. When we came to my grandparents' house on Sunday afternoons to break bread, it was, we are sitting here and in our good days and in our broken days and our brokenness, but we're just being humans. And everything didn't matter. When Grandma put the fried chicken and the collard greens and the turnips and the cornbread on the table, everything else disappeared. And we just engaged in real open conversation. And I think that's, again, what my parents did growing up. And it's funny because when I met my husband, his family did the same thing. He comes from a very large family. I come from a very small family. But I knew that we were destined to be together when I first met his family. And it was just like everybody crowded around the table and, you're elbowing each other, but you're sitting close to each other and you're just doing it. And so when we bought our house, right now it's just the three of us. It's going to stay that way, but it's just the three of us. But we bought this large table because we were like, we want to honor what we came from, the traditions that we came from. And we want to be the ones that are bringing people together. I think food is a powerful thing.
It is.
Food and wine, right?
It is.
It just breaks down barriers and you start to really see people and just enjoy the fellowship and the conversation. And depending on how many beverages flow in, right? People get more vulnerable and honest. Yeah, and they open up. And that's where a lot of magic happens. Yeah. And you just never know where the conversations are going to go or take you.
I think, in your work and my work, we constantly thinking about how to like deploy and strengthen this empathy muscle. But sometimes it's as simple as that. It's just like creating more of these opportunities for connection, more of these opportunities for conversations to be had, more opportunities for people to feel safe enough to lower their guard and to open up and to be vulnerable, and on and on. And I think figuring out and creating more spaces like that, whether it's in our own homes or outside of those homes, is probably a really, really good place to start and a really powerful tool in like really deploying and strengthening our empathy muscle. So I love that. Yeah. I love that. So the second thing I want to touch on that for me stood out as you were telling us your story is this idea of purpose. I think, in my personal experience, but also talking to like younger people and listening to them talk and navigate their way through finding their purpose is that when we are younger, we think our purpose is a thing. We think my purpose is to be a teacher, and we have a very firm idea of what that looks like. Yes. But the danger in that is that if that specific vision doesn't materialize, we might have the impression that we have lost our purpose, right? So for you, walk us through that evolution and that moment. I'm sure in retrospect, understanding that, being in the classroom wasn't a place for you. I don't know if it was a difficult realization or an easy realization. Walk us through that.
Yeah. It's funny that you say, So first of all, I have to say there's no purpose fairy. I think that's one thing that I find when I talk to people is that people are like waiting for this purpose fairy to come and boop, there's your purpose and off you go. And, you know, I have, when I work with clients, a lot of them will be like, I'm looking for this unicorn. And I'm like, okay, my kid believes in unicorns. I know that they're not real. And there's not this fairy that's going to come and bestow your purpose. Your purpose reveals itself. It unfolds and you realize it. And I think what I try to really help people really understand is, what are you called to do? Like, who are you? Like, what do people come to you for? What are your strengths? And how does that align with who you want to become? And how does that align with the values, the things that you hold closest and dearest to your heart? That is part of that purpose conversation. And what I've realized is that, I thought that I was going to be in a classroom, in a structured building, 4 walls, and my dry erase board or my chalkboard, or now they're smart boards. So I'm dating myself there. But, you know, I thought that's what it was going to look like. But what I realized is that I'm a growth guide. And what a growth guide does is they're a teacher, they're an educator, but really it's about asking the powerful questions. And that's what I do as a coach, right? Wow. I sit down and I ask people those questions that either they want to ask themselves, but are too afraid to do that, or they don't know which questions to ask to kind of get the answers that they want. But I'm a growth guide. I'm there. You know, I've even called myself a Sherpa. Like, I'm there along with you on the journey. I'm walking you through that experience, walking you with you. But my thought is that leadership is within. It starts within. And so when I say that I'm the chief fire starter and I help you light that match to get lit from within, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. That's what I'm talking about. Because if you don't know who you are in here and in here, right? The rest of it doesn't come out the way that you want it to, in the way that you're designed to show up and be in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. You know, I think it starts on the inside. I think even this idea of empathy, I always say, paradoxically, at least it seems paradoxical, but like, empathy starts with self-awareness. Yes. The more and the deeper we know and understand ourselves, the more we can see ourselves in other people, in their stories, in their needs, in their fears and insecurities and aspirations. And I think that's where the true power is. And I think it's important to have people like you guide us through that process, because sometimes the very idea of who we are isn't even clear to us. And it takes somebody that has a different vantage point to probe and to ask and to do that guided discovery. So what is required in those sessions where you are guiding people to find out who they are and understand what their strength, where their purpose, where their passion like what are some of the ingredients for you as a practitioner, for you as a coach, that you think you have to embody and have in order for those things to happen? Yeah.
I walk clients through kind of a 3-step process. And what that looks like is asking the question of, who do you want to become? And that's where we start. And what that involves is kind of looking at like I said earlier, like, what are your values? What are your strengths? What are you really good at? What do people come to you for? Because those give you clues, right? And then I also like to look at some of the themes of your life. Like, what are kind of the threads, so to speak, that have sewn you and created you into who you are in this moment? And really looking at that. And the next thing is that whole belief mindset and believing. So many times we don't lean into who we're supposed to become because we don't believe. We don't believe that we're good enough. We don't believe that, people like us do this, or, engage in these types of things, or people that are our age do these things. Like, it's just creating that inner confidence and creating that level of belief. And then I offer the space for people to become and be that braver, bolder, better leader, that better human, right? Because my philosophy is that all of us are leaders. Like, you don't have to have a title. You can show up, whether it's in your family context, whether it's within your home, or whether it's within your organization, whether you're an individual contributor, or whether you're a team leader, or whether you're the C-suite, whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we are all leaders, and how we show up and how we behave and engage in the world, like that's how we lead. That's leadership. Leadership for me is an everyday practice.
Yeah. I mean, for me, when I think about leadership, I think about two things. I think, one, you have to accept the responsibility to be in charge of other people, and not in terms of like bossing them around, but in charge of their well-being, in charge of their growth, in charge of their success, right? There is this, I call it a leadership dilemma, in that as leaders, we are accountable for specific outcomes, but we're not responsible for them. The people in our charge are responsible for the outcomes. And if we try to impact the outcome directly, we fail. So we have to trust that our job is to support, empower, provide the tools and the resources and the guidance to the people in our charge, because they are responsible for the outcomes that we ultimately are accountable for. And it's a very tricky situation. How do you say it play out? Both in how your clients recount their stories in the C-suite, but also for them as leaders. How do they manage that dilemma of, I want this outcome, but I know the only way to get what I want is to care for the people in my charge?
Yeah, and I think that's the trick, right? Is that you've got to do your own internal work first and figure out who you are and how you want to show up and lead. And then, you've got to sit down and help this person. And that takes work. And most people just want to be like what you were saying. Most people want to be like, you go do this, you do that, and this is what we're going to do. Instead of taking the time and the energy to really say, okay, I want to help you become who you're meant to become on the journey, on the way to getting to this outcome that we're both working towards. And that takes time and that takes effort. And so many leaders, I don't know if it's that they don't want to do it or if it's just, it's hard. And it takes time, and for some people, it can be really triggering, because if things don't go their way, then the self-doubt starts to come in, the imposter complex shows up. And it's just, or people think that they're a failure as the leader because things didn't go the way that they thought it was going to. And so it's often looking at it from that space of, let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. And that's a lot riskier. That's a lot scarier. It's a lot more uncertain.
It is, certainly. There is one word that consistently come out, like through your post on social and even in conversation I've had with you, and it's burnout. And for me, when I read the content and I hear you talk about burnout, in my mind, you are really on the front line of what happens when leaders and organizations lack empathy for their employees. Like, can you report from like the scene? Like, how does it play out in people's lives, in their emotional well-being, in their psyche?
Yeah. It's when people don't take the time to see people as a human being. And I think I've said this in some of my, I even said it this morning in one of my posts, like, we are human beings first. We are not human doings. And when leaders treat people like human doings, like go, do, instead of who are you being? How are you as a human? And saying, I see you. I hear you. Like, you matter. I value you. When we don't take the time to do that, people burn out, right? They get tired. And, that's part of the reason I'm so passionate about it. That's what happened to me. Like, that's what happened to me. Like, I got to the point, and that's nobody's fault. And it's not my fault. It's not where, the leaders that I was working for, it was just a combination of like, I'm just tired. And I wasn't taking care of my own well-being, and I didn't necessarily get the support that I needed from the people that I was working with. And again, it's kind of going back to that, like seeing people for who they are and recognizing that people are whole. I mean, if I'm being, fully transparent here, I think when I came back from maternity leave, I was struggling with a lot of postpartum depression. And I don't think I was honest with myself about that. So I couldn't have been honest with the people that I was working with or the leaders that I was working with because I didn't know that, right? But had somebody taken the time and said, Marisa, you seem off. Things don't seem right with you. Like you're missing a deadline. You're not able to keep up with stuff that you used to be able to, like, what's going on? How can we help you? Like maybe that would have, I don't know, maybe that would have triggered something. But I think that's what we've got to do, right? As leaders and being empathy led is like seeing people that like, and COVID's really brought that to the forefront, right? Because it's like people are seeing that like, I'm not somebody that like checks my personal life when I walk out the door and get in my car and go to work. Like, or when I hop on my Zoom call, like I might still have, my kid in the background, or my husband may have just gotten bad news from work or from a doctor or something like that. We bring all of that stuff. We don't check it at the door, right? And so I think as leaders, we've got to create that space to really check in with people and say, like, how are you? And not just accept fine. Because I think fine is a whole, like my clients know, like if you tell me you're fine, we're going to dig into that because that is not acceptable. Like you're not fine. If things aren't going right, if we're not getting where we want to go, you're not fine. And we've got to get to the root of that. And I think that's, again, what takes time and takes energy. And a lot of people are like, we've got to focus on the outcomes. We got to focus on the bottom line and don't want to take the time to really see people for who they are.
I mean, I think, first of all, thank you for opening up and sharing your story with us. But I think the point that you are making about seeing people first is that COVID, and I say it with all the care and being very mindful of the toll that COVID has had. But COVID has handed leaders an opportunity to see people, to see the kids walking through the Zoom, like you just said. And I think there's still this resistance of the blurred lines or the blurring of the lines between our personal and professional life. And I see it on LinkedIn all the time where like, this is not a platform to share your personal thing. Go do that on Facebook. But I think this is an opportunity. When the lines were so clear, it was impossible for you to know Marisa. But now COVID and the shifts that are happening in the workforce are giving you an opportunity to have more data points, to get to know them, and therefore to be a better leader for them and to show up for them. And I think too many leaders are fumbling the ball and are missing on this wonderful opportunity for them to really deploy the empathy muscle and ultimately become leaders. And to be even more pragmatic, that is also the pathway to getting the outcome that you are so desperate to get.
Yeah, and I think with the missing part that we're not really talking about here is that as a leader, you've got to create that space that where we talk a lot about psychologically safe spaces or building that trust. And again, that takes time and that takes energy. That doesn't happen overnight. And really building that place where people can say, hey, yeah, you know what? I am burned to a crisp right now. I have nothing left to give. Because that's where I was. Like that, I was at that point. Or, hey, Junior, like, you know what? I just got some really bad news and I got to check out for a little bit. I got to go take care of my mental and emotional and physical and spiritual well-being. Because I can't bring my A game right now. And that's a whole nother story. Because I work with a lot of people that are like what I would call myself a recovering perfectionist. And I think I work with a lot of people that are perfectionists and high performers and high achievers. And, it's just, sometimes we got to say, hey, you know what? It's okay if you can't bring your A game today. Just a little bit of progress, just be 1% better today than you were yesterday. And recognizing that people can't go full throttle all the time, because that's what's gonna burn people out.
And for me, like this again, talk to this piece that you mentioned earlier about leadership starting from the inside about empathy being about starting with self-awareness. Because really, if you are depleted, how can you possibly extend empathy and compassion and generosity to others? So it really starts with that level of self-empathy, that level of self-awareness, that level of self-care. Because if you are burned out as a leader, then it's impossible for you to have perspective and clarity and empathy for the people in your charge, regardless of how much they need it. Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking, like, I'm looking at the candle here and I'm like, yeah, like if your light has been extinguished, if your internal flame is no longer burning bright, how do you as a leader inspire, empower, embolden, create that space for other people to get lit on fire? I mean, I often say, I take you from burned out to lit on fire. And like, that's what it is, because if you don't take the time to light your own fire and tend to your own needs and your own soul care and your, giving yourself compassion, like you said, you can't extend that to others.
Yeah. What are some of the other, because I think, and maybe I am also a victim of that, when we say that leaders are not deploying empathy for others, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to, right? Like, what are some of those other obstacles that in conversation with leaders and high achievers you see they are facing, as well-intended as they may be, as willing as they are to be the kind of leader that people look up to, the kind of leader that people remember fondly? What are some of those challenges and obstacles that maybe as employees, we too must extend a little bit more empathy to the people above?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is, and I'll be honest, this was true for me. Like, I think, and I see this a lot with my clients, with the leaders that I work with, is this concept of self-trust. Is this concept of self-confidence, like having this self-doubt and not believing in themselves. So that imposter complex, and that's what showed up for me. It was like I had been promoted to this position, and it was like, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I have no idea what my role is here. I have no idea. And that's what happens, right? With a lot of leaders is we put them, because they're high achievers and high performers, we move them into this leadership role. And now they've gone from an individual contributor where they're only responsible for themselves. And now you're like, hey, and take care of yourself and take care of this group of people. And you're like, oh, and don't forget that you've got to do all of these other tasks and projects and all of these things too. And it's like, that's a lot. Yes. That's a lot. I mean, I really see leaders as people developers. And you got to develop yourself first. You've got to develop that self-trust. You've got to develop that confidence, that flex that courage muscle, and really be compassionate for yourself. But yeah, like then you've got to take care of your team and help your people and help them grow and learn. And that's hard.
It is.
That's hard.
It is.
So I think that's what I see a lot of people is that they get moved into these roles. And like, I have a client right now that she's like, I've been in this company for 20 plus years, right? And this specific role. And now I'm in this leadership role. She's like, I have no idea what I'm doing. She's like, what am I supposed to be doing? I'm like, I don't know. Let's figure it out together. But I think so often as leaders, we don't feel like we can say that, especially when we're responsible for other people, And so giving yourself some empathy and saying, it's okay to say, I don't know, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to figure it out together.
Yeah. I mean, I think another important piece of this difficult transition for leaders is that, like, I was promoted because I was good at the thing.
Right.
And now I'm not in charge of the thing anymore, which is where I excel, which is where I'm most comfortable. Now I'm responsible for the management of people and system and processes. But because I don't know how to do this, I want to go back to what I know, which is the thing. Yeah. And I think that leads to, micromanaging. It leads to leaders overextending themselves, not knowing how to delegate, because if they can no longer do the thing, then what's the job? What else is there to do? And I think it's challenging.
Yeah. When you said micromanaging, I think that comes from that fear of not being good enough. And so often when I see that playing out or manifesting in a leader, it's like, let's get curious about that. Let's check in with that. Like, what is it that you feel like you have to control? What is it that's making you feel like you have to know everything? Like, you've hired these people.
Mm-hmm.
You've said, I believe in you. Give them the space, you know? If they don't perform to the level that you want them to, instead of like getting right into their nitty gritty and just micromanaging, like asking like, hey, how can I help you? Like, here's what I'm seeing, what's going wrong, or what's missing, what resources do you need, what support do you need? Which is what empathy is all about, is saying like, instead of getting angry or frustrated with somebody when they're not performing or getting the results that you want, digging in and getting curious and saying, hey, you're not performing up to the expectation or the standard that we set forth. What's going on here? Like, do you need additional resources? Are you burned out? Do you need some time? Like, do you need, what do you need? What do you need? And getting curious there.
It seems to me like this is the second time you've said something, you alluded to this. It seems to me then that a core fundamental belief for a leader is to essentially say that at their core, most people, and perhaps all people, are always trying to do their best. Because if that's our starting point, then my reaction to when you drop the ball isn't, oh, she never wants to do. It's like, because fundamentally, I believe that you are trying to do your best. Therefore, something else must be going on. And then he allows me to ask and probe and like it. How does he, Yeah,
I'm laughing because like often if I make a mistake, I'm like, I'm doing the very best I can with the resources that I have. And then that's the point. It's like, okay, if things aren't working, what are the resources that I need? What are the additional support measures that I need, or support people or support from others that I need in order to do better?
That's a change of belief. I don't know if I've realized this before, but there is a fundamental change of belief that color the lens through which you look at your role and you look at leadership. Like, if as a person, I believe that people are fundamentally bad, then when somebody does something bad, I say, of course, some people are fundamentally bad. But if I believe that all people are fundamentally good, therefore, when something bad happens, I have to look for a reason, because it's just not normal. Something else has happened.
Right. And I think that goes back to what you were saying earlier about the whole self-awareness, because if you can't or don't want to see that people are fundamentally good, get curious about that and ask yourself, what is it? Like, what is it that I can't believe that? Because yes, are there exceptions? Probably, yes. But most people are doing the very best that they can. And people are good and at their core. And right, that's what we do as leaders, is helping them to become even better, to really step into who they are designed to become.
Yeah, that's powerful. I want to go back, and maybe this is a little bit of shift of gear, but that's something that I wanted to probe on earlier. Have you had the opportunity to reflect on what happened when your daughter came into this world? What was the shift?
Whew, that's a lot. So my daughter, we did in vitro fertilization. So our daughter is an IVF baby, and we worked very hard to bring her into the world. We wanted her very badly. And when she came into the world, I'm gonna get all teary. When she came into the world, and I realized that I wasn't doing what I was designed to do, and that internal voice was inside of me saying, Marisa, you're called for more. Like, you were designed for more. There's a bigger, there's a bigger purpose out there for you. There's more for you. And people need you to show up a little bit differently. A big part of that was because I felt responsible for her. She's my little leader. She's my little emerging leader, right? I'm responsible for her care and her well-being as a parent. And a big part of that was I did not want her to see me feeling like I had to compromise who I am and what I wanted to fit into this mold of what society told me that I needed to do or be. Especially as a woman, I really felt that was important for her to see that. I also wanted her to know that if something was no longer serving her, whether it's a relationship or whether it's a job or whether it's whatever, that if it is no longer serving her and no longer allowing her to grow and to learn, then I want her to know that it is okay. It is okay for her to shift gears. And it's okay if people think that that's not what's good for you. Because people were like, Marisa, what are you doing? Like you're at the peak of your career. Wow. And you're going to walk away from that and a steady paycheck to go start this business. Like, have you lost your mind? And it was like, like I said, like I had to be more loyal to my dreams and to my fears. And that's what I wanted to model for her. And I wanted her to know that as scary and as hard as it was and can be and probably will be, that it's an amazing experience and one that I would never ever regret or take back.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's so powerful. And I think to be able to give her that advice, knowing that you've walked the walk, knowing that you talk the talk, knowing that you are essentially taking the advice that you are giving her, I'm sure gives you even more confidence and more assurance in your role as a mother, as a leader. And I think at times that's really what leaders have to do, is to take a hard look at themselves and take a page of their own book or a taste of their own medicine and walk the walk, so that they can confidently say to the people in their charge, it's okay to do this. It's okay to, change your path. It's okay to take care of yourself. Yeah. Because I modeled that for you. It's okay to be vulnerable and open in this space because I modeled that. Yeah. And I can see how that then becomes the through line that not only drives you, but informs a lot of the decisions that you make on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Yeah. I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, I want them to be courageous leaders. Yeah. I want them to operate in brave spaces and be brave. And I say that because I've done it personally and professionally. And also I continue to try to push myself and challenge myself to do something that pushes me outside of my comfort zone. Yeah. I used to like to try to do it on a weekly basis. Now it's probably more like on a monthly basis, but I try to do something every month or so that really scares me, because and build that muscle. And walking away from that career path after 20 plus years was probably in the top 5 scariest things I've ever done in my entire life.
I'm sure. And it's not just the fear, right? It's this idea of sunk cost. Like we have such a hard time walking away from things where we feel we've invested so much. So we rather just continue to compound because I've put in so much time and money and energy in this job, in this relationship, in this and I cannot walk away. When cutting your loss sometimes is the better, braver, and more sustainable thing to do. Yeah.
You know what? The other big part of it too is that my identity was so wrapped up in that space. And when I left, I was like, okay, I was my job title. Now who am I? And that's one of the things I invite my clients to think about is, who are you without the job title? Because, right, COVID has shown us that none of our jobs are stable, And so, like, who are you becoming? Who are you showing up as without that job title? Because when I walked away, I was like, oh, okay, now I have to define myself not by the title that was given to me by someone else, by an organization, by a company. I have to think about, like, how do I define myself? And that's hard because my identity was wrapped up in being an administrator within higher education. Like, that's who I thought I was. And now I've unraveled that and really decided that that is not my full identity. Like I have multiple identities. I wear multiple hats, you know, throughout the day. And so I'm a new person and a better person for it.
I mean, goals and job titles and are just means to an end. They are tools that we use to find alignment between our intention and aspirations. They are tools that we use to live out our purpose, but it's not our purpose. And I think back to the conversation around purpose is, if I say that my purpose is to be a police officer, and that for some reason I can no longer be a police officer, I'm in trouble. I have lost my purpose. But if my purpose is more fundamental to the human experience, to saving people's lives, then I can do that as a police officer. But I can also do it as a doctor. I can do it as a school teacher. I can do it as a soccer coach. I can do it and on and on and on. So really going back to something that is more fundamental to what you want in life, who you are, and what contribution you want to make in the world is the work that we have to do, and that I'm so happy that you are facilitating for so many people and so many women. And we thank you for your contribution.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been a powerful conversation, and I'm on fire now.
Good, me too. Thank you again. This was an
you.
amazing conversation,
Thank you.
and I can't wait to share with the rest of the world.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.